Some other things to understand about incidents, and again, how they're different from service requests. It's important if we understand the prioritization, and in the following prioritization also our service targets. So incidents are typically urgent, meaning they require much tighter time frames than a service request. So if I'm requesting a new laptop, it may take time for IT to order a new one from the vendor and for it to be delivered and then configured and so on. But with an outage, we really need to move quickly to triage and understand what the impact and urgency are so that we can know how to prioritize that incident. Something that, and this is something I know that we talk about a lot with our customers because prioritization can be such a tricky thing. One of the big concerns is always, well, we can't let our end users prioritize their own requests because they'll tell us that everything is a priority one. So there should be very definite and very well-defined values for impact and urgency, which will automatically generate our priority levels. So the end user, for example, may have some input into the impact. This is usually the number or type of people impacted, so you may have a higher level impact for VIP or for a widespread outage. The urgency is defined as the critical nature relative to the business. So if there is an issue related to our email system, well, that's that may be something that's extremely urgent for the organization if that's their main method of communication. Whereas if they have an issue related to a system or service that's not as critical to the organization, so for example, if they have, given the example of an airport, if you have a problem with your control tower, that is a high urgency. If you have an issue with the arrival and departure displays within the terminal, well, that's not going to make anybody a plane late to depart. It's not necessarily going to be a big impact to the business, and it may be then a lower level urgency. You should be able to form a matrix with impact and urgency. So if we have a level 2 impact and level 2 urgency, then that might equate to a level 2 priority. Or if we have a level 1 impact but a level 3 urgency, then that might be a level 2 priority. So you would set up a grid, impact on the y-axis, urgency on the x-axis, and priority then would get filled in to help us to determine what the corresponding service targets should be. So we might determine that priority 1 needs to be resolved within an hour. Priority 5, though, we may have as many as a few days to resolve. Just a guideline here, usually we don't have any more than 3 levels for impact, 3 levels for urgency, and 5 levels for priority. Moving on to problem management. So we've talked a little bit about the break fix. And I had mentioned earlier that it's not a good idea for a single person to be both the incident manager and the problem manager, and I'll explain why. In problem management, we're really looking at how do we prevent disruptions to service, and if a disruption does occur, how do we minimize the impact of incidents that can't be prevented? We're really looking at the root cause. So problem management is focused heavily on root cause analysis. Now, the difference between problem and incident management, there are multiple differences here. I mentioned problem management is focused more on root cause, whereas incident management is focused on restoring normal service as quickly as possible. They're handled by different teams. They have different drivers. And to illustrate this, I'll give you the example of a printer outage. So you have a printer in the office that has failed, and So the end user calls the service desk, lets them know that the printer has failed. Now, a printer technician is going to want to understand, well, is this a paper jam? Does it need to have new ink? You know, they may get in and fiddle around with it. But really what the service desk should be focused on is restoring normal service as quickly as possible. So instead of making them wait while the printer technician is trying to fix the printer, the service desk should, for example, reroute that end user to a different printer. So again, restoring normal service or restoring service by rerouting them to an alternate printer, that allows them to more quickly resolve the incident even while the underlying problem still exists and is still being worked on and still being resolved. So two completely different responses to the same issue. We also have some organizations that struggle to differentiate between incidents and events. In manufacturing, it seems, especially, they see, and when they talk about incident reports, they're really referring to what we would call events. And there is some overlap, but some events might just be informational. So if you have a particular monitoring system that might just inform you that a server's just been added to the infrastructure, or it's been added to the network. Not necessarily a need for a response, just an informational monitoring event. Then you have warnings. So you may receive a warning that your mailbox is 50 or nearing the threshold. You may, excuse me, you may be reminded to clear out your mail items because you're running out of space. That may or may not be an incident and a reason for IT to investigate, but it's really those exceptions where there is that big overlap between incidents and events. So you've exceeded your thresholds. You have a particular security breach on a database server. These are the alerts that then are triggered in response to these exception events that then may become or be logged as incidents that need resolution. So that covers the processes that I wanted to review with you all today within service operations. We'll take a look now at the phase of continual service improvement, and during our next session in about 2 weeks, or in exactly 2 weeks, I'll be covering this in more depth. But just wanted to talk a little bit about how the output or the reports that are generated from service operation feed into continual service improvement, and also talk a little bit about how the CSI phase of the life cycle can feed information back to improvement for service operations. So in continual service improvement, we're really looking at this cycle. The basis of the CSI model, or continual service improvement model, is the Deming Cycle. The Deming Cycle starts with planning, doing, moves on to doing, checking, and then acting. So you can think of this, too, as how we've gone through this whole service life cycle. And it's at this part of the Deming Cycle, the check phase, that's where we're producing the reports that help us to take corrective action and then continue the cycle all over again. In order to know what to measure and what types of reports to generate, we need to understand first what our critical success factors are. Critical success factors might be, for example, for change management, it might be to protect IT services when making changes, making sure there's no disruptions. Based on those critical success factors, we generate our key performance indicators. so I like this line here, but that many metrics may be measured, but only the most important are defined as KPIs. We want to ensure here that efficiency and effectiveness and cost effectiveness are all managed within IT. So some of the KPIs for the service operation lifecycle include, for service desk and incident management, we might decide that one of our CSFs is the ability to handle increasing call volume and to restore service more quickly. In incident management, our business value is measured in minutes. So some of the things that we might look for the KPIs include mean time to restore service, what is the percentage of incidents resolved within our service targets, can we measure the incidents that are bypassing the service desk or incidents that are escalated beyond the service desk? Do we have ways of measuring customer satisfaction via surveys? What's our staff turnover look like? And based on all of that, what is our average cost per call? You'll notice that each of these KPIs has a directional icon associated with it. So obviously, mean time to restore service, we would want to see that decreasing. There are some times when we may change the direction. So for example, if we're looking at number of incidents bypassing the service desk, and obviously we want that to be reduced, sometimes the number of incidents logged by the service desk, we may want to see that. So if we are really making a push to have our end users contact the service desk more often because we feel that they are not being productive if they're trying to resolve issues on their own for too long, we may want to see an increase if we're having this kind of campaign. We may want to see an increase in the number of incidents reported to the service desk. On the other hand, if we've just had a rollout of a new service, we may want to eventually see a decrease in the number of incidents reported to the service desk, because that indicates that the new service has been well designed, the users have been well trained, and they are not needing to call the service desk as often because the system is running smoothly and there aren't as many issues. Some KPIs for problem management. Based on the CSF, we want to have an integrated system that allows us to include known error information and workaround information, and to link problem records to related incidents. So we would want to be able to measure, for example, how many known errors are being added to the database, how many incidents are related to problems, how many reactive problem records are we seeing. So, for example, if you think of what might be a proactive problem, there should be ways of monitoring our systems where we can see problems or potential problems before there's an impact to the end user. So really what we want to be able to do, say, for example, we have a server that is mirrored, but the mirror site is starting to fail. That's something that may not be evident at all to the end user, but if we're able to proactively identify that problem, we identify the root cause and resolve that problem, then we've really been proactive and we've protected the live environment or the service operation phase of our life cycle.